Welcome to Musings Television, where your host, Fabian, invites you to bloom with a new perspective that will encourage, uplift, and inspire. Here he is with today's musings.
Hey world, welcome to another in the episode of Musings of the Mind, pros to encourage, inspire, and uplift. On our last episode, we would have delved into the importance of curating our mental health, and I trust that as we continue to journey through this pandemic, we're all taking those necessary steps to maintain our mental health, reclaiming our mental health, reclaiming our mental peace. And so, stemming from last week's reflection on that important health issue, I thought it would be good to consider some tips that we can use or practice to basically, you know, contribute to effective mental health, right? So I went and did some research and I came up on some tips that I found on People First UK, that 10 tips for good mental health. And the first one says, get plenty of sleep. I think most of us would know or would have heard about the importance of sleep and the whole process that our body goes through when we sleep to regenerate nerve cells and all those things. So rest is important. If we don't get enough rest, it can affect how we are able to carry out our day-to-day functions. And it is recommended widely that we get at least 8 hours of sleep. So sleep is important. So if you're not getting enough sleep, you need to do what you need to do to hit the sack and get some shut eye. The next one is eat well. So nutritionists often tell us about a balanced diet, having the right amount of carbs, the right amount of vegetables, and the right amount of protein. So we need to check our diet and our menus when we're preparing our meals to ensure that those food groups are covered in the proportions or the portions that is recommended by those in the know or health practitioners. The next one says we're to avoid alcohol, smoking, and drugs. Okay, so if we are given to partake in any of these, then it would be wise for us to watch our intake, how much we drink, the extent to which we consume we smoke, and extent to which we use drugs. And these things can have or does have addictive properties. So we certainly need to do it in moderation if we must, or try to avoid them all together. Another one here says, get plenty of sunlight. It says sunlight is a great source of vitamin D, and vitamin D is a really important vitamin for our bodies and our brains. It helps our brains to release chemicals which improve our mood, like endorphins and serotonin. And so it encourages us to try to get a lot of sunlight. Interestingly, persons in colder climates often come to the tropics to get their tan on. And I suppose that is one of the things that they are doing when they do come visit the tropics, such as here in Jamaica, and they sunbathe on the beach. So they're getting in their good dose of vitamin D to release those endorphins and those serotonins so that our brains and our bodies can be energized, so to speak. Manage stress is the other of those 10 tips for good mental health. So we need to check our stress levels, identify those stressors in our lives, and in identifying those stresses in our lives, we then need to take steps that will allow us to manage those stress so that it doesn't become a source of ill health that can lead to unwanted outcomes. The next one says activity and exercise. So that too it says is essential in maintaining good mental health. Being active not only gives you a sense of achievement, but it boosts the chemicals in your brain that help to put you in a good mood. Exercising can help eliminate low mood and anxiety, stress, and feeling tired and lazy. It is also linked to living a longer life. So, exercise. Do something you enjoy is another one. So if you're like me, I consume a lot of television. These days, that is not so much Netflixing in terms of binge watching, but I have become rather, I wouldn't say addicted, but entertained by Nollywood. So that's movies coming out of Nigeria via YouTube. So that's how I unwind, so to speak, with a lot of television. Connect with others and be sociable. Now, in this period of COVID, when physical or social distancing is the in thing, it's a bit challenging, I'm sure, for you to be able to socialize as we would normally do by going out to eat and going to the beach and the rivers, etc. But everything these days calls for us to pivot. So it could be via Zoom that we have a socializing event, playing some game or the other. Similar to how in recent times, virtual house parties could be something that we do to socialize if you're so inclined, or find whatever makes you comfortable and whatever will assist you in maintaining contact with others. And the last of the 10 tips says we are to do things for others. And it says helping others isn't just good for the people you are helping, it is good for you too. Helping someone can help you with self-esteem and make you feel good about your place in the world. Feeling as though you are part of a community is a really important part of your mental health. So the good book says it's better to give than to receive. So that is one thing that you can do to maintain good mental health. So again, the 10 tips from the UK-based People First publication says you're to get plenty of sleep, eat well, avoid alcohol, smoking and drugs, get plenty of sunlight, manage stress, engage in activity and exercise, do something you enjoy, connect with others and be sociable, and last but by no means least, do things for others. So let's get to it, to curating our mental health. Another thing that I think also contributes to our mental health is our mindset. Our mindset also helps to create our mental health, right? And I came across another article recently entitled "Optimists Are Better at Finding New Jobs." And while this is not necessarily job related, I thought, having read it, that some of the points made therein are essential to how we see the world and also impacts on our mental health, or could impact on our mental health. So if we are optimistic as opposed to pessimistic, I think it can also go a far way in how we see the world, because that is essentially what the two refers to, whether you're optimistic or pessimistic. The optimist will see things as being likely better than they actually are, though they are able to see things as they are, while the pessimist is going to be the one who sees things worse than they actually are. And the article, which was a research done through Harvard and written by one Michel Gillan, it says, for example, in one part, optimistic thinking empowers us during certain times, prompting us to take positive action steps. The reason for this is that optimists generally expect good things to happen in the face of challenges, and most importantly, believe that their behavior matters for creating positive change. And I think that is important, especially in the world or the season that we're now in COVID, the pandemic, which has disrupted our lives in many different ways, whether it be from a job perspective or from the perspective of loss for persons who have lost loved ones during this period. And just the general mental toll that it is taking on many of us. I don't know about anybody else, but I find that sometimes when I go on the road and come off at the snap of a finger, when I feel different in my body, I am almost certain that I would have contracted the COVID-19 until it passes and everything returns to normal, and I realize that I am fine. So if it's even in that very limited way, COVID has been really playing on people's mental health. And so it is important that we engage in optimistic thinking, right? To see things even in the midst of what is going on around us, the negative things that are outcome of COVID, we can still be positive. We can create that space in which a new perspective is bloomed and it's not all doom and gloom, right? It says too that the pessimist will get around to those behaviors. That is what was said before about the optimists, but it often takes them longer and is done with less enthusiasm, which in nearly all cases affects end results. So you see it? This is a research coming out of Harvard, and it is telling us that it's good and it pays to be optimistic. So if you're a pessimist today, I would encourage you to try to reframe your way of thinking. Don't always see things worse off than they are, but try to look for those positive, even in the midst of the negative, that will cause your perspective to bloom anew. Because, as it says here, the optimist believes that their behavior matters in creating positive change, and the pessimist, nearly in all cases, their lack of enthusiasm will affect the end results. It says also that optimists focus more on the energizing aspects of work and the areas in which they have control. Optimists are 5 times less likely to burn out than pessimists, and 3 times more likely to be highly engaged in their jobs. And I suppose we can use that to extrapolate and not only confine it to their jobs, but just as a matter of how optimists will operate in the world at large, right? Will cause them to be 5 times less likely to be burnout than the pessimist and 3 times more likely to be highly engaged in whatever they are doing. It says also that the most hopeful aspect coming out of optimism research is that our mindset is malleable. Just like a muscle at the gym, we can work on it to strengthen it. Our mindset is not merely a result of genes and upbringing. By refocusing attention on the positive, meaningful parts of life and our personal strengths, we can scientifically retain the brain to default to that way of thinking. So the saying often goes that habits are easy to make but hard to break. So today I want us to encourage ourselves and encourage each other to be optimists, to retrain our brain to bloom a new perspective even in the midst of the negative, to retrain our minds to see the light at the end of the tunnel and not just the eternal darkness that exists in the tunnel, but that there's a light that is shining through the tunnel. And the more you walk through that dark tunnel, the more you are seeing more of the light as you approach the end of darkness, right? It is said that the darkness hour is before the break of dawn. So even as we go through the season of COVID, which for many are their darkest hours because they have lost their jobs, they have lost loved ones, and it has just been an upheaval of sorts at this particular time. But in the midst of that, let's be optimistic. Let's bloom a new perspective that is just waiting to refresh us, give us strength, the courage, the inspiration to go on, to embrace life in all its dispensation. What else can we do? So today, choose to be an optimist. Bloom new perspectives from those dark moments and see how impactful they are on changing things around us. I trust that you were encouraged, inspired, and uplifted by today's musings from my mind to yours.
There you have it, this week's musings. We hope you found it encouraging, inspiring, and uplifting. Let Fabian know your thoughts by leaving a comment on this video. Do spread the word and invite others to subscribe to Musings Television. Until next week, may your hearts remain ever joyful.